All right. Good evening. Welcome to the realm of history. I hope that you will find some help here tonight. I'm here to go over just a few things with you first, and then I'll open up to any questions in the chat that I can help with at all in any way regarding the quiz, of course. So I want to just make a quick announcement. Yes, we are still going to have the quiz tomorrow, even though it's a half a day. I do understand it's a half a day. I did cut off some questions, so we're down to about 37, 38. I always make at least two versions. So that's something that you can expect, 37 to 38 questions. And I'll be going over the exact format here in just a moment before I open up for questions. I did want to also remind you, you can save yourself some time tonight, maybe tomorrow morning. Go ahead and get your documents stapled together. Here's what I would look for. Number one, you're going to turn in your blank review sheet with your name on it. And if you want to write this down, go ahead. So number one, your blank review sheet with your name on it. The second sheet in the packet would be your responses, your key terms, your key people, and your key concepts. So that'll be the second sheet in the packet that you want to have stapled. And then after that, it would be section 1 notes that I already graded, gave back to you. You want to have those in there. Section 2 that we took in class. And of course, section number 3, which was the activity that we did kind of whole part whole, where we had some notes that we read together and we had some notes off the board about civilization. So that would be your packet. That's called your chapter outline plus your review sheet. There's going to be 10 points for the review sheet and another 10 points for the chapter outline. As long as you submit all of those papers to me, you'll get full credit there. Third order of business is I want to talk about a few pointers. Once again, remember, my suggestion is to utilize your review sheet, quiz yourself off of your review sheet utilizing the key terms. Try not to look at your responses until you've gone through each term and see if you can answer it on your own. Then I would suggest, even tonight after this session, to reread all of your notes, going over those carefully, highlighting any notes that pertain to any of the key things on the review sheet, of course. That's my number one recommended tool. After that, it's looking at some of the key pages from the text that I have outlined on the review sheet. Okay, so at this time, I would like to know if you have any key questions. Go ahead and put it in the chat. I will be looking there, and I will certainly answer anything that you place there in my best possible way. So I'm going to wait, and while I'm waiting for those questions to come in, I see some goat symbols and some smiley faces, which is cool. But go ahead and shoot your questions away, and I would love to give you some help. If we don't have questions, I can go over a few things. I am prepared for that. I can share my screen with you and show you some pages in the book. Mr. Greening has a question. He's a former student. This one is not pertinent, Greening, for chapter 1. We're on chapter 1, sir, so please don't spam the chat with irrelevant questions. Yes, Jay Pizzle says we have a quiz. Yes, we do have a quiz on Monday. Yes. Via, what happens if we don't finish the test tomorrow? Good question. So you're going to have to come prepared. And remember, it's going to be a challenge. And I do understand that. So what's going to happen is I'm going to give you the entire hour, or, well, it's really half an hour, actually. So you're going to have that time to work through your test. Here's the actual format to help you sort of ease your mind. You're going to have 13 multiple choice questions. Those can go fairly quickly. Then you're going to have 9 matching questions exactly. After that, you'll have 6 true and false. True and false are pretty simple, so that shouldn't take you too much time. You have 7 fill in the blank. I was going to have fill in the blank where it was just you come up with the term and put it in the line. But what I did is to try and help save you time and ease your mind a little bit, ease your stress. I put a fill in the blank with multiple possibilities. So I put a word bank for you to choose from. So that's going to help you save time as well. I think the most time-consuming part will be the end of the quiz, which will be questions 36, 37, and 38, which are the short answer. The good thing is you kind of know what the short answers are because, as I told you, those essential questions that we've been going over are going to be the short answers. And it also is listed on your review sheet. What are the short answer and essay possibilities? You won't have an essay, so your short answers will be in sentence format. The only long response or extended response is going to pertain to the 5 characteristics of civilization, where you definitely will need to list and explain and provide examples like we talked about in class. So if you don't finish the quiz, I would definitely let you stay a few minutes after. And then one of the issues that I could allow is I could allow you to come after school since it's a half day. But I think that that's a little tricky because what you can do there is look at the questions and then maybe look them up throughout your day. So it might be something that I have to give on and just say, hey, you could, if you didn't finish, let's mark which questions you didn't finish. Okay. And you can come after school to do that, because I know that some people do take a little bit more time. So I'll try to be as welcoming as possible. But we're kind of in a situation where I wanted to have this quiz on Friday, but due to the fact that we had so many half days, I moved it to Monday, and I really don't want to move it from there. Okay, back to the questions. Let's see. We have, here's a good one. Let me pin this one. Okay, it says that Homo sapien and Cro-Magnons are in some ways similar to modern day humans. What is the difference between the two? A little bit of brain size. Skeletally identical, definitely. Brain size would be the determining factor there. What I would know is that the question on the quiz is going to pertain to Cro-Magnon, and it's going to say about Cro-Magnon being skeletally identical to modern human, and that's the determining factor that you really want to focus on there. Next question I will go to here. Do you want us to know the exact dates? Alexia says. Okay, so no, you do not have to know the exact dates. What I would focus on, though, would be time spans. Like, for example, the Neolithic age, okay, 8,000 to 3,000 BC. The Bronze Age, 3,000 to 1,000 BC. Those are going to be things that you definitely want to know, those time spans. But any specific dates, you should not have to worry about at all. Okay, next. How many sentences do you want us to write for the short answers? Sort of depends on the response. It sort of depends on the question. There's no real requirement there. If you can answer it in one sentence, that's great. I don't think many of mine will be answerable in one sentence. So what you're going to really need to do is you're going to want to make sure that you look at the question in whole, and then you provide as much detail as you can to answer the question. So my short answer, there's no like 2 to 3 sentence minimum or maximum. It's answering the question in as much detail as is possible. That's what I'm looking for there. You don't even have to use full sentences. As long as you provide a statement that's accurate and answers the question and responds to the prompt, you'll be in good shape there. Is Ur an example of an advanced city? Yes. Ur was one of the earliest cities in the history of the world in Sumer. And yes, it met the 5 characteristics, one of which being an advanced city, had a high population for its time, and was definitely a center of trade. So yes, that would definitely qualify Ur as an advanced city. For the important pages in the text, do we have to memorize the map on page 3? So the map on page 3, Hannah, is primarily there to help you understand human originations and migration patterns. So I wouldn't say you have to memorize it, but get the big picture concept, right? Understand that human life began in Africa. And then, as you can see, over the course of time, it began to expand into the Middle East, into Europe, into Asia, and so on and so forth. So getting the big picture out of those maps, those charts, those graphs, I think is the most pertinent thing for you as a student to do to get ready. As far as rote memorization, in my class, I don't think rote memorization will always help you. Obviously, anything that you're learning in any class requires memorization. Don't get me wrong. Math, science, history, English, you do have to memorize things. That is part of the way that the mind works. But in my class, it's more taking what you've learned, maybe what you've memorized, if you want to look at it that way, and then applying it and utilizing it to problem solve in a way or answer questions that take you a little bit deeper. What I'm looking for is a little bit more analyzation, syncretism, comparison, and contrasting. That's what I'm really looking for you to be able to do with, of course, that initial information. Okay, moving down to the next question. Should we memorize what each country produced in farming? Example, Africa, wheat and barley. Yeah, so we had Africa, we had China on that list, we had Mexico, we had Peru. I would be able to understand that these are places where farming began. That's the bigger picture. As far as like what they grew and what they first produced, I don't think that's really going to help you on this assessment. Later assessments, that might be something that I would look for you to do. But here, I would like you to be able to say, okay, if you have a question that says, hey, what are 4 or 5 areas where farming originated? And that would be Africa, China, along river valleys, Mesopotamia, you could throw in there, Mexico. Those would be areas that I would definitely stress in your study. But as far as memorizing, the actual crops grown, I don't think that one's going to be a question on this test or assessment. Next question says, good question. Can you explain the main difference between hominids and Australopithecine? That's a good question. So hominid is the broad picture. Any human-like creature that walks upright is classified as a hominid. Australopithecine is the oldest hominid yet found. So Australopithecine is a more specific explanation of a hominid. So you've got hominid, and then you've got Australopithecine. It would be like talking about cars. You have Ford, or if you have cars as the bigger picture, car would be the equivalent to hominid. A Ford Mustang would be the equivalent of a Australopithecine. Actually, you could go back and say the first car by Carl Benz would be the equivalent, because Australopithecine is the oldest hominid yet found. Hopefully that clears that up. Via says, what is the main difference between Neanderthal and Cro-Magnon? Okay, so Neanderthal is a little bit more physically developed as far as muscular structure. They're a little bit thicker bodied, a little bit thicker bone structure than Cro-Magnon, heavier. Your book mentions that they have slanted brows. So they're a little bit shorter on average as well. Those are the main differences structurally between Neanderthal and Cro-Magnon. Now, what your book will say is that Cro-Magnon had better communication skills. And this is a really determining factor for you on this quiz. So Cro-Magnon was able to communicate with spoken language in a much more feasible and efficient way than the Neanderthal. And so Cro-Magnon were able to have planned and team hunts, which allowed Cro-Magnon man to gather and hunt food at a more expedited rate, which most likely, we believe, caused Neanderthal to go into extinction. So that is one major thing that you want to know there, Via, about the difference between Neanderthal and Cro-Magnon. Hannah says, can you explain more about the disadvantages of settled lifestyles? Okay, so here, this is a really good question, Hannah. Thank you for sharing that one. So this is going to be, those of you who are here, the 36 of you, this is going to be a short answer question. Okay, so I'm going to tell you that right now. That's one of the benefits of joining tonight. This will be a short answer. You're going to have some of the advantages and some of the disadvantages. If we were in class and had a discussion, I would say, hey, let's ponder this thought. Can you come up with some disadvantages of being in a settled lifestyle? Settled lifestyle is where you have agriculture, okay? Is where you're settled in a city. One disadvantage that you should write down, okay? One disadvantage is that you are a target. You are definitely a target now for nomadic groups, because you've settled and you have crops, and then you start to advance and specialize, as we learned. You are a target for outsiders, and they may raid you. And this happened quite often. So number one factor there, that's a disadvantage, is that you become a target. Number two disadvantage that I'm going to share with you tonight, you can look up and think about some on your own that would qualify. But number two, natural disaster. When you're settled, natural disaster may strike, and that could wipe out your entire settlement. Even like tonight, we had some thunderstorms. Those high winds could ruin your settlement, could destroy your crops. Drought, okay, if you're a farming civilization, could have a huge impact. If you're settled near rivers, flooding. We saw flooding have major impacts on the Egyptians, the Sumerians, and even in China, until they started to develop ways to sequester those floods by building dams and other structures on the sides of rivers. So the flooding could be one example, but natural disasters, fires, if you're settled, wildfires could cause problems as well. So those are just a few examples of disadvantages. Hopefully that will spark your mind a little bit to go out on your own to develop some of your own ideologies as well. Okay, Kyle says, let's take a look at this one. Kyle says, what do we need to know about the Fertile Crescent and the key places? Okay, so the Fertile Crescent, everybody should write this down. This is in your key places. The Fertile Crescent is where Sumer was. And it's a crescent shape, like a moon. So it's shaped like a moon. And it's the land between two rivers, also known as Mesopotamia. So you have the Tigris and you have the Euphrates, both in modern day Iraq. Back in that time, it was known as Sumer. So the Fertile Crescent is where really you had your first agricultural villages growing. You had your first agriculture because of those river valleys. They created geographically an excellent spot for the growth of agricultural products such as wheat and barley, like you had in Egypt. Egypt is very similar. The Nile Valley was advantageous as well because, like I said, flooding was disadvantage. Well, flooding was also an advantage. Let me explain. So think about the bookcase behind me. If that was the natural width of the river, when it floods, it's going to expand outward. Okay. Where it expands outward would be like the white part of the wall, right in this area here and right in that area there. That's going to actually make that soil irrigated on its own. And once the river recedes and goes back to its normal width, that land is going to be very fertile. It creates a mud-like structure or a mud-like substance called silt, which is where you actually want to grow your crops. So the Fertile Crescent had that advantage. And that is why people flocked and migrated to Sumer. And that's one of the big reasons why Sumer became the world's first true civilization. Good question by Kyle. Okay, let's go to Brett. Do we need to rip all 3 sections of notes out of our notebook to turn in with the review? Yes, because what I want to do is I want to grade those notes. I want to take a look and make sure that you did your due diligence. Remember that this is very important. This is your study guide. I want to make sure that you're doing your part in class and on your own. And so I will give you points for that. But yeah, you're going to detach it. I want you to staple it together tonight. That means that when you come to my class, you give me your note packet, bam, you can start your quiz. So yes, let's get that done tonight and spread the word to those who aren't on. There's probably 40, 45 some students who aren't here with us. But if you can spread the word for me, you will know better than I will. But yeah, we want to have those staples so that we can expedite the time or make our time more valuable. Yes, so you will be ripping those things out. Okay, NGX, I don't know who that is, but that's fine. Let's take a look at this question. Can you explain the difference in social classes in Ur? The book only says there's a wealthy class and a poor class. Okay, I understand what you're saying there. Yes, let me go over that. Basically, what you have in Ur, here are the social classes that you need to know. On the top, you have rulers and priests. Okay, the priests were really your number one factor in early civilizations because people really believed what they were talking about. They had a lot of control over what went on in the civilization. And so priests were number one. Rulers would actually be below priests. Rulers and kings would look up to priests and get guidance from them in the early civilizations. Then you have merchants, people who were buying and selling things. They would be kind of your middle class. Okay. And that's just one example. There are more examples, but I'm giving you the examples that you need to know. And then finally, artisans. Remember those people who make things by hand. Those are going to be your groups in the lower class, for example. So once again, rulers and priests, merchants, and then, of course, artisans. Janda is up next on my list, and then Larkin, and then Justin K. And we're moving our way down. So I will get to all of these. Just bear with me. I'm making my way through. Okay, Josh says, could disease be another example of disadvantage of staying in one place? Definitely. Well done, sir. Yes, disease is going to spread in a much faster way if you're settled and if you're living in a conglomerated area. Villages, yes, more so than nomadic, but cities, especially advanced cities, disease, as we've seen in this pandemic, is going to spread much faster when people live in close proximity. And so, yes, I would say that that's very important as a disadvantage there to have as a list. Sure. Okay, Larkin says, do we need to know the exact location where the Royal Cemetery, the Ziggurat, or any other important places were in the city of Ur? No, not necessarily. I think what you would want to know is how a city might be laid out. What are some of the important factors that people focused on in early city building? But as far as knowing these exact locations, no, there won't be a map on this quiz. There will be maps on later quizzes that you have to diagnose. So thinking in that line is a good line of reasoning, but on this quiz, you will not have to do that. Justin K says, what major changes were brought on by the Neolithic Revolution? This is another big picture question. Okay, I'm going to pull that one up if you don't mind, Justin K. So what we have here is what were the major changes brought on by Neolithic Revolution? We talked about this was an essential question, right? So farming is one, but it led to settled life. That's really another big picture. So once you have the Neolithic Revolution, you have this changeover from, sorry, Kiera, we're not there, Kiera yet. When you have this changeover from nomadic lifestyle to agriculture, people settle down. And once people settle, some of the big changes are they no longer have to really hunt and gather. They can still hunt and gather, but you have farmers now. And once we get irrigation, like we learned advanced technology, we don't even need everyone to be a farmer. Some people are going to take jobs as artisans, merchants, blacksmiths, so on and so forth. So then you have your specialization. So really what you want to think about is the Neolithic Revolution. The development of agriculture is what led to increase in food supply, which then in turn led to an increase in population, which then in turn led to, of course, civilization. So we don't have civilization without the Neolithic Revolution. So those are some of the major changes that you want to have on your list. Okay. Kiera says, okay, on the opposite side. Good. Yes. Kira, what are some advantages of settled lifestyle? Well, number one, settled means that you probably have farming. So that's one of your big advantages there. Number two, it's going to be structures. You're going to build structures which are going to be keeping you safer from weather patterns and things like that. The physical nature of traveling is demanding on the body. So once you're settled, you're going to have longer lifespans on average. It's not going to be much. It's going to be a few years early on. But these are some examples of advantages of settled lifestyle. And then, of course, with settled lifestyle, you have a constant source of food. That's really the big thing. You start to domesticate animals, which really the whole big factor on domesticating or taming and controlling animals is for meat and hides and bone products. That's really what humans gain from that. So I looked at some disadvantages and some major advantages there as well. Graves says, for the settled and roaming lifestyles, do we need to know both or just settled and unsettled? So you'll need to know both. When you say settled, you're talking about agriculture, okay? Unsettled would be nomadic, would be the term you'd want to say. Instead of roaming, use nomadic. So you've got nomadic and you have settled. Those are really, or you could say sedentary, which would be settled, and non-sedentary, which would be nomadic. Those are interchangeable words. That's the way that you really want to look at that. Emma says, what do we need to know about the 5 things of civilizations? Excellent question. The 5 characteristics of civilizations. Not to be picky, but yes, you want to know the 5 characteristics of civilization. Of course, what you're going to need to know. You want to be able to list them. Number 1, list them. Okay, here you go. Are you ready? Advanced cities, specialization or specialized workers, complex institutions, record keeping, and then finally advanced technology. Those are the 5 characteristics. But you need to take it a step further. You need to know examples like we talked about in class. I'm going to give you one example. When we talked about complex institutions, I went to the class and I said, hey, who can come up with some examples of institutions in today's world? And many of the classes said, government or religion or the school that we're in is an institution. So you'll need to be able to come up with 2 to 3 descriptive examples for each of those characteristics. So number 1, you want to list the characteristic, name it properly. Number 2, you want to define it in the way that we did in class. In your notes, that's from section 3. And then you want to be able to come up with some examples. So that's the biggest thing that we've learned about. Okay, that's the big picture. That's our essential question from section 3. So you want to be really well prepared in the fashion that I just mentioned for that question. Okay, we're moving down to Bella here. Can you explain some advantages of a settled lifestyle? So I just did that. I don't know if you missed it, but I'll go over it again. Some advantages of settled lifestyle would be the fact that you have a readily available supply of food, the fact that your body has less wear and tear from traveling in the geographic locations and miles and miles and miles, throughout the year. So average lifespan is going to increase. Number 3, you're going to then advance. You're going to advance in civilization. You're going to advance in technology. You're going to have rules and laws that keep people safe. So those are some of the things that I mentioned earlier. Let me take Emma's down. Sorry about that, Emma. Okay. Are there any other questions that I can answer? This is your chance. Go ahead and type in there. I would love to answer any final questions. You can ask me any question that you want regarding the material. I'm willing to help you in any way. I know that you're up against the time. I don't want you to be too stressed out. Let me give you some advice. Look, all you can do is do the best that you can. That's all that I can ever ask of you. So I wouldn't get too stressed. Just all you can do is pray and ask the good Lord to guide you to use your talents to the fullest. And you can rest assured that if you put forth your best effort, then I'm going to be proud of you, and you can be proud of yourself. So don't worry. We have some questions coming in. Larkin says, what about BC, BCE, AD, and CE? Great question. Yes, we didn't really get a chance to go over this much in class. So let's do that right now. So I'm gonna go over this. You might want to follow along on your review sheet and write this down right now. These are pretty simple, but I want you to know this very well. Great question, Larkin. So BC stands for before Christ. Okay. Now we're a Catholic school. Many of you are Christian, so we can use this terminology in our class. So BC is the Christian connotation for before Christ. So if we said 1000 BC, that means 1000 years before the birth of Christ. Now BCE is the more, what we could say, politically correct form of this. Okay, BCE says before Common Era. So this is like if you don't put the religious connotation in there, right? You could say BCE. It still means before the birth of Christ, but it takes out the religious connotation. Okay, you'll see a lot of textbooks using BCE to try and be a little bit more, welcoming to people's differences. Okay, next, AD is the most important one. Okay, because it's a little bit more difficult. So AD stands for Anno Domini, Latin, Anno Domini, and that means in the year of our Lord. Okay, make sure that you understand this is to use to date events occurring after the birth of Christ. After the birth of Christ. It does not mean after death. Okay, it means Anno Domini. Because if it meant after death, there would be 32 to 33 years that we wouldn't have record of. Okay, so remember it this way. AD means in the year of our Lord, or it is used to date events that have occurred after the birth of Christ. Okay, after the birth of Christ. Once again, CE stands for Common Era. It's the same thing as AD, except for without the religious connotation. It's the more, what you could say, politically correct form. We use, in my class, BC and AD, but you might come across the other ones, so I wanted to make sure that you knew those as well. Great question. Okay, I'm moving down the list here. Give me 1 second to take that question down. Alexia says, for Mary Leakey's discoveries, did she find anything else besides the footsteps? Yes. So she did make other discoveries. Okay, but the one that I want you to focus on here are those footsteps, because that told us that what she found meant that hominids, Australopithecine, walked upright because we find footsteps in a pattern. So that led us to understand that these were human-like creatures that were walking upright. That's the main factor there. She made other discoveries. Okay, bones. All right, she did studies on Australopithecine skeletal bones and structures, and other species as well. But for the most part, I want you to know about the footprints that she found. I see Via and Ava had the same question. Okay, yes. Homo habilis, yes. That's man of skill, meaning possibly fashioned early tools. Okay. Did I miss Kira's question? Here's Kira's question. Can you list the discoveries that Mary Leakey made? Yes, the footprints, the skeletal structures. But I would like you to focus, Kira, on the footprints. That's the one thing that you want to focus on for this quiz. Okay. BC, yes, Ava, before Christ. Yes. What is irrigation? I couldn't find it in my notes. Great question, Grace. Irrigation is diverting water from a natural body, okay, to some type of crop field for the purpose of watering plants or edible crops. Okay. So irrigation is today, like in your yard, you might have these sprinklers that pop up and they water the grass in the morning or at night. Back then, they would dig irrigation canals, which would channel off of a river, and then they would use the water in those canals to water the crops in their farms. So that's basically irrigation is providing water from a natural body like a river or a lake to your crops. That's what irrigation generally is. Alexandra said, why did people want to migrate to the Fertile Crescent? Well, because the land, the soil there had silt from the flooding of the rivers, and people started to farm there early on. So civilization was growing there. So for the propensity of trade, for the chance to create a farm, for the chance to make money as a farmer, for the chance to live in a city like Ur, those were some of the big draws for people looking for work, looking for money, looking to settle. Well, not money because we didn't have money yet, but what I mean is wealth. I should say wealth, property, wealth. That's what we're really looking for in understanding why people migrated to the Fertile Crescent. Larkin says, what is the exact definition of trade besides bartering? So trade is the exchange of goods and or services. Okay. Trade is the exchange of goods and or services. Bartering is an example of trade. Bartering is one way to trade. You can trade goods and services. You could trade, let's say if you're a blacksmith, you could trade hammers to a merchant for apples. That's an example of trade. But that's to make that deal, you might negotiate. That's bartering. Or trade could be where country X has oil and they trade oil for currency, money, or some other product. So trade can take many forms, but it's simply the exchange of goods. Bartering is a form of trade that does not use money or currency. That would be how you could separate the two ideas there. Master Janda says, I couldn't find prehistoric in my notes. Okay, I got you. I'm here for you. Prehistory or prehistoric means before the invention of writing. Before the invention of writing. So when you think about prehistory, that's going to be before 3000 BC, because we believe that cuneiform, the world's first form of writing, was developed in 3000 BC. So what you really want to know is that prehistory is anything that happened before the invention of writing. So when you say something's prehistoric, that's what you're referring to. It's before we had written record and we had to utilize artifacts or bones or fossils or something like that to study that material. Okay, NGX says, what is the difference between Homo habilis and Homo erectus? Number one, Homo habilis is man of skill, meaning they were some of the earliest tool makers, okay? But they're very short and they are hunched over. And so they couldn't migrate very far. Homo erectus is more upright. So they had longer legs. They're a little taller. And so that's why Homo erectus is the first to migrate out of Africa. So it's really the span of their travels and their migrations and sort of their skeletal structure and their musculature that allowed Homo erectus to migrate further or travel further. Okay, I think I'm covered down to Sophie. Sophie says, or Soph says, did nomads only move in search of food and water? Good question. I think that's the main factor there. I think that's Sophie. I'm going to say Sophie. I think that's the main factor. What I would say is definitely they moved for food and water. But the one thing that you might add is shelter. Shelter might be another factor that you could add in there. They're primarily moving for food and water, which I think are the two more important factors for survival. But shelter could play a big part of that as well. That would be the one thing that I would add to why they might move. There are probably some other factors, but I think those are the bigger picture ones. Why did we benefit from cave paintings? Sophie, do you mean like we as students now or humans now? Or are you meaning people who lived back in those times? Let me talk about both. First, people who lived back in those times, the cave paintings were artistic expression. So people who love art, right? And people who love art, this is a escape for them. And they could also, a lot of the cave paintings, as you might know, have religious implications, and so it had a big factors related to religion. Like you'll see one on page 14 and 15, maybe 12 and 13, that have human hands posted into a wall and a cave, and that's a resemblance, hey, that we are here and that we are alive, and it's part of a religious factor there. But also they have a lot of maps, and they also would use the cave paintings to teach. Like there's one cave painting in France called Lascaux Cave in France, and that cave is of different species that were able to be domesticated, and then another one is of different species that you could hunt, that were a little bit easier to kill. So those are some of the ways that cave paintings helped humans for survival, and for artistic expression, and just meeting those human needs back in the BC era. Today, cave paintings give us a great deal of insight as to how early humans lived, because we see those things and we can say, well, the flowers in these caves and the drawings of flowers and how we see grave sites, and then we see drawings of grave sites, that tells us that they had some belief in the afterlife. And also the pictures of hunting and the pictures of domesticable species tells us that, hey, they knew and they planned how they hunted. And here are some species that you can tell were being hunted during those times. So those are some of the things you wanted to take from that. Via says, are there any other main topics that we should really study? The key concepts, the essential questions, your essay short answer possibilities. It's hard for me to say. I mean, I really want you to study everything. I want you to know everything. But those are really the big picture ones. Okay, I hope I didn't miss anybody. I'm sorry there. What was the definition of trade? I was going over that with Larkin. Trade is the exchange of goods and services. The exchange of goods and services. Did we only cover Paleolithic, Neolithic, and Bronze Age, Sophie? Yes, that's where we're at right now. We are in the Bronze Age. So we started at the Paleolithic Age, and then we went into the Neolithic Age, which hits at about 8,000 BC. And then we hit into the Bronze Age, which is where we left off at section 3. So we're right about between 3,000 and 1,000 BC. Yes. Hannah says, do we need to write down the short answer part on our review? No, it's not a requirement. I mean, if it were me as the student, I would write it down, because I'm the type of student, or I'm the type of person, when I write it down, it helps me conceptualize it. But every student's different. So it's your choice there. All you're responsible for are the key terms. You have to write those, number and define, the key concepts, and then also the key people. Okay. But after that, you do not have to write anything else. Josh says Neolithic Age is farming, right? Yes, the Neolithic Revolution starts the Neolithic Age around 8,000 BC, and that's where we see the upshoot of farming civilizations and villages grow. So yes, when you're in the Paleolithic Age, you do not have farming and you do not have domestication. Once the Neolithic Revolution hits, you have agriculture or farming, and you have also domestication. Yes, so there's going to be a lot of questions about that, Josh, and everyone else. So make sure that you know the difference of what was going on Paleolithic Age and Neolithic Age. Brett says, will there be anything on the quiz that isn't on the review? Yeah. I mean, there are things from the reading. Okay. There are things from the notes. That's why I suggest reading through your notes, checking out those pages that I mentioned in the book. I try to be as thorough as possible on the review sheet, and this one's pretty thorough, but unfortunately I can't put every last thing. And I don't want this to be, this is an AP class, so don't think this is straight memorization. If you're just searching to memorize all these terms, that might not help you all that much. You got to really think a little bit deeper. You have to understand the definition, but then apply it. You have to be able to use what you know to answer the question. That's really how you should be thinking here. So if I were you, just let me give everybody an example here. Like if I'm looking at bronze, okay, And I'm going to go to my notes. And I know that in the notes, it talked about the Sumerians mixing copper and tin to develop bronze, right? What I would do is I would read, okay, what was going on before the development of bronze in my notes? What was going on after the development of bronze in my notes? Because then we could say, okay, what changes might bronze bring about? Okay, so that's sort of the deeper layer that you're going to need in this class. This quiz is the easiest one of the year, but you're still going to have to do that. Later on, you're going to have to do that on every single question. So that's what we really need to get ready for. Soph, I love it. Yes. Why is the Neolithic Revolution called a revolution? Because it had a major change. Because it resulted in a major change. When you think about revolution, don't always think about war. Think of it as being a major change. It changed human life, and it changed human life based on how they survived, how they progressed. Because you go from having people searching for food and water, like you mentioned earlier, to now they have agriculture, so they can then settle. And then all of the snowball effect of that, the domino effect, you could say, of then, specialization, advanced technology, so on and so forth, that all comes from this major change. And that's why it's so revolutionary, is because it changed human life for good. We really didn't go back to nomadic lifestyle. Graves, what would be the definition of the opposable thumb? Let me show you. Opposable thumb is where your thumb can cross over and touch your digits. If you didn't have the opposable thumb, you'd have to pick up things like this, and that would be very difficult. So the opposable thumb is where the thumb can cross the palm. That's how you want to define that. A thumb that can cross over the palm. What is the difference between Neolithic age and revolution? Okay, so I just went over the Neolithic Revolution. That's the development of agriculture. The Neolithic age is the time period from 8,000 to 3,000 BC. So the Neolithic age is this time in which we had agriculture. We had domestication of animals. We also had better tools being made in the Neolithic age, more polished tools. They're made of stone. This is still the new Stone Age, but the type of tools that are being developed are more fashioned, and they're stronger and they're more durable than they were in the Paleolithic age. So that's the main difference there. Justin K, what happened during the Paleolithic age? It's the old Stone Age. People were nomadic. They were hunting and gathering. They were using stone tools, wood tools, tools of bone. That they were doing cave paintings, cave drawings, things of that nature. But Paleolithic age, we don't know a whole lot about, because that's before the invention of writing. So those are all we have are artifacts. We know they hunted and gathered. They were nomadic. We know they did some cave paintings. We know they had some ritual burials. They believed in religion. But other than that, that's about all you really need to know. Dominic says, do we have to know where the Australopithecus and Homo habilis, Homo erectus, Neanderthal, and Cro-Magnon originated, lived, and all the differences between them? Well, it certainly can't hurt to know that. There was a nice timeline in the book, and I put that on your review sheet, the timeline on page 8 and 9. So knowing that would really be helpful. Dominic, I'm going to come back to this. If we get a lull in the questions, I'll come back to this and I'll show you those pages on my screen. But what you need to know is what separates these different groups. What are some determining factors? Where is one way to separate. Okay, so yeah, I think the where is important, and that's directly in the text, pages 8 and 9. If you don't have the book, guys and girls and guys, I put a link to chapter 1 in the bulletin board. I believe it's there. So if you didn't have the book, you could do that, or you could get a picture from a friend. Okay. If you also search Google World History Patterns of Interaction, it'll take you to a teacher site called Miss Turnbull. Miss Turnbull's site has the book online for you. It's not suggested because it'd be hard to do that in class. Sometimes the internet doesn't load. So you need the paper book. You need the paper copy. But if you get in a jam, go to Google and search World History Patterns of Interaction, Miss Turnbull, Turnbull. You can find any chapter, any page in the book. Yes, where they lived is important, Dominic. Larkin, do we also need to know the meaning of Homo habilis or Homo erectus, like upright man? Yes, Homo habilis, man of skill. That'd be like a number one thing. Homo erectus, upright man. Yes, that would be something that you could use to determine. Those are all going to be in a matching. So knowing a working definition or as much information as you can about Australopithecine through Homo sapien will be helpful. But that timeline there and what's written in the textbook is going to be pertinent for you. Yes. Grace, was there farming and civilization in the Paleolithic age? No. Make sure that Paleolithic, there is no civilization. Everybody's nomadic. There is no farming until 8000 BC. Now, could there be some gray area there? Yes. But once you have farming, that takes us into the Neolithic age. So I'm going to say no. Let's make it a clear-cut no. That'll keep it very simple for you. Okay. If you want to stay with me, I'm willing to stay. I mentioned that I was going to try to share my screen and show you a few things, starting with the pages on 8 and 9. So just give me 1 second. It's been a while since I've done a live review. It's been since last year, but let me just give this a shot. If we fail, hey, at least I tried. Okay. But I really want to say before everybody leaves, boy, I really appreciate you joining tonight, and I hope that this has been helpful. But stay with me if you want to see some of the things that I think are going to be very pertinent. Okay. All right. So I should be sharing at this point, and I'm going to go to the online book. Hopefully you can see this. I cannot see you now, but I can go through a few things. I don't want to get you dizzy, but the pages that I'm talking about are right here. This is the second half of it, and this is the first half of it. So it starts with Australopithecine. All of this information right here would help you delineate between the different species and groups right here. Okay. And then down, that's page 8. And then down here is page 9. So knowing this information right here at a bare minimum will help you understand. But I think what's important is also what's in the reading here. And you guys took the notes on this. So making sure that you're able to do that would be, I think, really a beneficial factor for you. Let me bounce back and stop sharing. I'm back. Okay, so hopefully this worked out well. Put it in the comments or send me an email what you think. You know, this is something that we can do. If you don't think it's beneficial, then we don't have to do it. But I feel like, hey, it helped me understand where you're at a little bit, and I was really happy to do it. So if you have any further questions, I'll hang out for a few more minutes. I definitely don't want you up past your bedtime. I don't know, what that is, but I don't want your parents to get mad at you. So, whatever you need to do, just let me know. But I'm going to hang out here for just a few more moments. Let me know what you think in the comments, or go ahead and put a question down there. Thanks again. I really appreciated all of the questions and the effort that you put in. Of course. Yes, ladies, it's my pleasure to be here to help you. Anything that I can do, I would certainly do that. Eli, yes. Okay. All right. I see that you guys are benefiting from this, so that's a good thing. I don't see any further questions, so I want everybody to have a wonderful night. Once again, my final points would be, remember, don't stress out too much. All you can do is the best that you can. Remember, this is your first quiz with me, so a lot of it's going to be kind of feeling it out, see what it's like. If the time becomes an issue, don't get upset. Hey, tomorrow, if you have to come back after school for a few minutes and finish, I'll be there. I'll be there, and I'll let you finish your first quiz to the best of your ability. But we will have to mark which ones you've already answered. I don't want you to really look up answers and go back. That'd be against the honor code. So please be professional about it and do your due diligence there. I got a question. For the social classes of did the rulers look up to the priests? Yeah, they did. Now, that's a good question, Grace. So let me talk about that. This is getting a little bit further than what we want to know for this chapter, but here's the deal. So yeah, the priests were really the top. The priests were calling the shots for the longest time in world history. Okay. Until wars. Once wars come into play, the kings take control. So when wars come to play, the priests, they're really not leading the military. And so the people are like, hey, we need somebody who's going to protect us. And so they look to the kings now. And then the kings say, hey, if I use my soldiers here and make a defense wall, the people are going to like me and I can take power. And so it's kind of a Game of Thrones like action. But yeah, that led to the kings sort of usurping or taking power over the priests when times of war really become more prevalent. Okay, we've been on for 50 minutes, so I'm going to go ahead and close it off. Have a wonderful night, and I look forward to seeing you tomorrow, and good luck on the first assessment. God bless all of you.